Ладен вітер полем пірі, а на землю пада ноч, а із ока суза бліста, є род мене мораж поч, а не йди, не йди, остань ту, єрдино благо на мом сердасту, а не йди, не йди, остань ту, єрдино благо на мом сердасту. Času ti vesna, moje brodice, to su vam ručice, moje marice. Času ti vesna, moje brodice, to su vam ručice, moje marice. Čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, odo u marine. Čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, odo u marine. Času ti igra, moje brodice, to su vam suknice, moje marice. Času ti igra, moje brodice, to su vam suknice, moje marice. Čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, odo u marine. Čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, čirvir bella mare moja, odo u marine.
This is Roslyn, Washington, where much of the story of Washington Slavic people begins and continues to this day. Early in this century, immigrants came here to work in the coal mines and on the railroad. The mine roster of 1916 listed all of them: Bulgarians, Russians, Slovaks. Austrians included Croats, Slovenes, Serbs, and Czechs, whose homelands were then under Austrian rule. This famous picture of the student body of Roslyn Grade School shows 25 children who represented 24 nationalities. In the early days, Shaft Street in Roslyn was solid Slav. Slovaks, Ukrainians, and Croats lived there. It was called the Krizhulya, a Slavic word meaning crossroads. It is still called Ducktown because in the old days Slavic women kept flocks of geese and ducks. Jack Brosevich was 16 when he came to Washington to work in the mines. Sometimes he worked 7 days a week, and weekend dances were the reward.
Ronald, they had a dance every Sunday. The train take us up from here, up to the Ronald. I believe at the Ronald that time. And the train was hauling from here, 1 o'clock, train leave here, Krialum Depot, and take the people up, pick it up from here, Roslyn, and so on, up to Ronald. Then the train come back again, 5 o'clock, when the dance is over, to bring it back again, you see. Paying 10 cents for the transportation, round trip, or 15 cents, whatever it was. But that was nice. I had a lot of fun.
Brosevich was a member of the Temperitsa band that formed in the area in the early 20s. Last winter, when the Seattle Junior Temperitsans performed in Roslyn, he reminisced and was deeply moved.
And not like that Temperitsa baby was this last winter, those kids. I cry. It comes so in my heart, you know. Honest, I just couldn't help it.
Who are the Slavic people? It is probably easiest to identify them by language. South Slavs include the Slovenes, Serbs, Croats, Macedonians, and Bulgarians. West Slavic people are the Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, and Wends. East Slavs include Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. Where do they come from? This 1918 nationality map shows the lands of Russia, the Ukraine, and Eastern Europe. The dark line indicates the area formerly under the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Slavs began emigrating to this country as early as the 17th century, but most of them came between 1890 and 1920. That was the period of the Great Migration, when the majority of immigrants entering this country were from Russia and Eastern Europe. The Jews, though not a Slavic people, spoke the Slavic languages and intermarried to a degree. Poverty and persecution drove them out. The Jewish people from Eastern Europe and Russia were the largest ethnic group among the emigrants of the Great Migration. The overwhelming reason for emigrating then was economic, and the emigrants were almost entirely from the peasant class. It was not a completely spontaneous exodus, however. Shipping companies made money recruiting workers for American industry. Emigrants were promised jobs and good pay in American industry. After the Russian Revolution and the First World War, strict quotas were placed on emigration. There was a fear of communism in this country, but also negative attitudes toward the large numbers of Jews and Catholics who had entered the U.S. up to that point. Thereafter, émigrés were decreasingly from peasant stock and increasingly well-educated political refugees who could pay their own way or who had a sponsor in the United States. For example, many refugees of the Russian Revolution escaped to China. From there, boats went to two places on the West Coast, San Francisco and Seattle. These were mostly prosperous families, many with aristocratic blood. After the Second World War, émigrés from Eastern Europe were largely people who did not wish to live in countries dominated by the Soviet Union. The Polish population of Bellevue is made up almost entirely of veterans who were stationed all over the globe and refused to return to Poland when the war ended. By the time the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia in 1968, many Czech people had taken advantage of Dubček's liberal regime and left the country. The Czech community of Seattle gave financial and other aid for the resettlement of several hundred Czechs in the Seattle area. But this report deals primarily with the émigrés of the earlier period, the 1890-1920 migration, whose churches, cemeteries, buildings, and traditions may still be seen and are an important chapter in United States history. Those early Slavs came to work in the mills, in the mines, and on the railroads, and formed the backbone of many of these industries. They settled primarily in the eastern and midwestern United States, though minor settlements can be found in almost every state in the Union. They had a reputation for being tough, a quality depicted in the famous children's story, Joe Magaratz and his U.S. Citizen Papers. Hooray for Joe Magaratz! Hooray, hooray! He made best deal in world for the USA. The men came first. Anxious to bring the whole family over, the emigrant applied for citizenship as soon as he could. A citizenship dinner in Roslyn. That night, memories of the old country must have weighed heavy on the souls of these strangers in a new land.
Ой, піду я лугом стежкою білкою, де червоні ружі, як мої літа. Там живе коханий, серденько обраний, що мене так ніжно пригорта. Там живе коханий, серденько обраний, що мене так ніжно пригорта. Зав'яжу йому я русою косою, рідні карі очі, що одну кохав. Тільки ружа знає, хто серденько крає, а мені навік він присягав. Тільки ружа знає, хто серденько крає, а мені навік він присягав.
In Washington state, the Slavs settled mostly west of the mountains, with eastern Washington settlements clustered around Spokane and Roslyn Cleellum. P.L. Washington was a prairie in 1855 when Joseph Maurerman, a Bohemian from the Czech lands, bought the claim to the land and began selling lots. 30 years later, the town was predominantly Polish. Polish immigrants who had worked in lumber industries in Wisconsin and Minnesota began moving to western Washington to work in the forest and sawmills. Today, PL is something of a living ghost town where a room for rent is still hard for loggers and sawmill workers to find, where just a few remnants of that booming Polish community can be seen. The building to the left is Anne Frunya's dry goods store. When her father built the store at the turn of the century, it looked like this. The whole family worked there. Anne Frunya is almost 80. She opens the store for business every day and sells some of her own crocheted Afghans. Down the street from Miss Frunya's, a few other buildings contain original fixtures installed by Polish immigrant merchants. The hand-painted back bar with the old soda faucet at the confectionery, and the back bar at the Pastime Tavern, a massive structure that was brought around the Horn in the last century. The Poles also settled in Raymond and Aberdeen. Raymond's original Polish neighborhood is gradually being torn down. The old Polish Hall is now owned by the local theater group. Until the 1950s, Aberdeen was the center of Polish life in Washington state. This is the dedication of Polish Hall in 1916. At the hub of the old neighborhood are the remodeled Polish Hall, Saints Peter and Paul Church, and Karnacki's Grocery, a popular gathering place. The Poles still are the most active ethnic group in Aberdeen. A Wednesday luncheon with card games afterwards. Connie Składowski is 86 and loves a card game. She says she has lived so long because she paces herself right and won't eat canned foods.
Well, I tell you the truth. These days, people run too much, young ones, especially young girls. They don't cook. No any kind of soup in their house. Everything open. What do you think that soup stay? Maybe 2-3 years, maybe more than that. Hell, that's not good. I cook my soup every day, and my kids eat every day soup.
Fran Malinowski White is the first woman mayor of Aberdeen. She is proud of her Polish heritage. Gig Harbor was settled by Croatian fishermen from the Dalmatian coast of present-day Yugoslavia. In 1867, Sam Jarosic was one of 3 fishermen who rowed into this harbor and decided to stay. He and several other Croatians who settled in Gig Harbor married Indian women. One of the best known of these Dalmatian families is the Scansey family, whose Marina West dominates the harbor. Peter and Mitchell Scansey built fishing boats here. Their descendants have kept one of them, the Avalon, in its original condition, with original engine and parts, and use it to this day in their work. It is revered by other fishermen. Mitchell and Joe Scansey ran the ferry line between Gig Harbor and Tacoma beginning in 1917. That era came to a close in 1940 when the state bought the Scanseys franchise and replaced their ferry boats with the first Narrows Bridge. Nick Bez came out of this community. Bez made a fortune fishing in Alaska, where he and other purse seiners overwhelmed the beach seiners. Bez, or Bez Malinovich, founded West Coast Airlines, which was later bought by Howard Hughes and became Hughes Air West. Jake Busich is a fisherman and the current mayor of Gig Harbor. Other Dalmatians followed their ancestors' fishing traditions in Bellingham, Anacortes, Everett, Seattle, and Tacoma. The Fishermen's Packing Corporation, founded in 1928, is still in existence. Snowcap, Ocean Spray, and Waterfall Pink Salmon were labels on their products. The 35 purse seine vessel owners who founded it needed a constant market outlet for their fish. Stockholders were almost 100% Croatian, and they represented all the coastal fishing cities in the state. The old coal mining towns of Black Diamond and Enumclaw are well-known Slovenian settlements. In Enumclaw, social life centered around the lodge and the church, no longer standing, and this building, which was called Crane Corner. The word crane comes from Krajinska, which is the name of a region of present-day Slovenia in Yugoslavia. In the tavern, Ludwig Pogorelt, son of the original owner, still plays a mean game of pool and enjoys reminiscing about the old days. Frank Zumek at the High-Low IGA in Black Diamond smoked Slovenian sausage and hams in this smokehouse behind the store. Many Slovenians came from a farming tradition. As soon as they could afford it, they bought farmland and left the mines. Some started farming after the mines closed. They are famous nature lovers, as this popular song tells us. The sun is shining on the mountains. Up above the birds are singing and white flowers blooming. It is heavenly in the mountains. The coal mines and sandstone quarries of Buckley and Wilkeson drew many of the early Slovak and Ukrainian immigrants, among others. Those who were Eastern Orthodox worshipped in this little church, which was organized at least 100 years ago. In the Spokane area, 3 old-timers recall the early days. Eli Wojnowicz is 93. He is Serbian. He can give you the names of the 10 or so Serbs who operated boarding houses in Spokane for immigrants who came to log in Idaho and to work on railroad construction in the Spokane area. Pete Sudan is 88. He is Croatian. He says that in the early part of this century, 40 to 50 Croatian stonemasons who had been working in Great Falls, Montana, trickled down to Spokane to resume their trade. Almost all of them were from 2 small towns on the coast of Yugoslavia. Pavla Podlas was a mail-order bride. She married Frank Podlas, a Moravian sawmill worker in Elk, Washington. Now in her 70s, she has never lived anywhere but on this farm, where she and her son's family are dairy farmers. All these early immigrants felt a need to organize their lives along ethnic lines. Their communities were based on 3 main institutions: the church, the ethnic newspaper, the fraternal unions, which were also called lodges. The churches were often copies of those in European villages. Immaculate Conception Church in Roslyn is reminiscent of this church in the Croatian village of Mrkopal, where many of Roslyn's residents were born. Maria and Vasil Krutila were married in Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Church in Wilkeson in 1904. When the mines closed, many Slavic families left. The church was neglected, and blackberry vines consumed it. Today, it's open again for Sunday services. Once a month, a Seattle priest says the liturgy, but on the other Sundays, the membership conducts a reader service. Then, the singing is dominated by the distinctive voice of Mrs. Andrew Michael. She and her husband are Slovaks, and they are the ones who have kept this church alive. Almost the entire congregation of 40 is related to Mr. and Mrs. Michael. The Polish church in PL was the source of controversy in the Catholic Archdiocese at the turn of the century. Parishioners demanded not only a Polish priest, but more say on church holidays, property rights, and other issues. In 1916, a break from Catholic jurisdiction occurred, and an independent Polish national church established. Today, the church is under episcopal auspices, and only a handful of the Polish people have stayed with it. The same crisis occurred in Tacoma. Parishioners who wanted an independent church built this one with their own money. This one was built by those who stayed in the Catholic jurisdiction. The first one was not able to survive financially. Protestant denominations can be found among the Slavs in Washington. They worship in some of those many and diverse churches in the Ballard district of Seattle. This is the Ukrainian Baptist Church. The Russian Baptists hold services in the Ballard Baptist Church. The First Slavic Full Gospel Church is a Pentecostal church which mixes Polish, Russian, and Ukrainian in its services. The choir produces unique music which can be heard Saturday mornings on a local religious radio station. In 1931, the Orthodox Church in the Soviet Union brought suit against St. Spiridon's Russian Orthodox Church in Seattle. Still calling itself head of Russian Orthodoxy in the world, the Soviet Church claimed the property and religious jurisdiction over the Seattle Church. St. Spiridon's lost the case, the congregation disbanded in protest, and 6 years later dedicated a new church at Yale and Harrison Streets. Its architect, Ivan Palmov, is a local Russian emigre.
Sami sebi drug druge vedi во наш Христово Я твоя держава, и царство, сила и слава, Отца и Сына и Деда Духа ныне и присно, и по веки веков.
Ethnic newspapers were the main link between Slavic communities across the country. They were certainly the chief source of news about job opportunities. In the United States today, there are over 200 Slavic ethnic publications, the Polish and Ukrainian being the most numerous. What a Seattle Russian thinks of Solzhenitsyn can be found in Bulletin of the Russian Colony, published monthly by John Kovtunovich. It is the only Russian publication on the West Coast, north of San Francisco. The third basic institution of American Slavic communities was the Fraternal Union. Its main purpose was to offer life insurance policies, otherwise unavailable, to members who worked at hazardous jobs in the mines and factories. The insurance policy guaranteed a burial plot. That is one of the reasons ethnic cemeteries can be found in these early settlements. Roslyn is famous for its 22 separate cemeteries. The Slovenian cemetery in Enumclaw is in the Old Crane community. On November 1st, All Saints' Day, Slovenians observe the traditional candlelight ceremony in the cemetery. But the fraternal union was also the most important social institution. This was a combined lodge parade in Roslyn in the 1920s. Other clubs grew out of the lodges, like the men's athletic clubs called Sokols. Those three institutions, the church, the ethnic newspaper, and the fraternal union, may not have the daily importance for second and third generation Slavic people, which they had for the emigrants. But they do on special occasions. Everyone remembers the breads Baba used to make for Christmas and Easter, specialties which are still recreated with pride on the holidays. These are Easter foods ready for the blessing of the bread at the special Ukrainian Orthodox service in Seattle. Ukrainian egg dyeing classes are available in the city. A wedding like mothers and grandmothers, this one in St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Cathedral in Seattle. One of the most permanent ways cultural ties have been maintained is through profession. Many first, second, and third generation Slavic people are working in trades and businesses practiced by their fathers and their fathers before them. Others have brought to Washington State art forms for which their people are renowned. Ivan Novikov, one of the best-known ballet instructors in the Northwest and in the country. He goes as far as Salem, Oregon by bus once a week to teach dancing to young people. Adam Vleklinski, a researcher, was laid off by the Boeing Company a few years ago. That forced him back to a full-time involvement in paper cutting, a famous Polish art form. Mr. Vleklinski has contributed several of his creations to the Smithsonian Institute. In most of the older, smaller settlements, the lodge halls have been boarded up or sold, or they are only occasionally used. The fraternal unions are not active there. On the other hand, the American Croatian Club of Anacortes is one of the most ardent groups in the state, and they want to build a hall. Most of the members originate from the island of Korčula in Yugoslavia. 2 years ago, a dance instructor from Yugoslavia taught them the dances of the village Vela Luka. Their ensemble costumes were carefully researched and then handmade by members. They are already a popular performing group in the Northwest. In Aberdeen, Ted Karnacki says he makes more Polish sausage today than he and his dad ever did.
No, just like I said, that in the early days, my dad, when he made it, until he passed on, it was a touch and go sort of a thing, and he made about 50 pounds a month. And after Dad passed on, why, when I got to it, why, we spread it out now. We're making about 150 pounds a week. And on the holidays, it runs up to 800, 900, 1,000 pounds on Easter, Christmas, New Year's, all the big holidays that it calls for it.
A new pride in ethnic heritage has blossomed in this country. People are proud of long and exotic names with skis, itches, and offs on the end of them. They want to be different. It can be summed up by the well-known story of Bobby Vinton's re-entry into the pop music world with a gold record called My Melody of Love, which has a refrain sung in Polish. Vinton says he owes that success to his Polish mother, who reminded him of his roots. She said that his sagging career and spirits would improve if he would let his Polish-American heritage inspire his life and work. The young Polonia group of Seattle-Tacoma sang My Melody of Love and performed a traditional Polish dance for one of the biggest events in every Polish community across the country, Mother's Day. In the Seattle-Tacoma area, where the Slavic population of the state is now concentrated, there are dances, bazaars, dinners, and picnics, lots of them.
Hey!
The Slavic people welcome the public to almost all their activities. A quarterly newsletter, Events in the Slavic Communities, publishes a calendar of events from around the state. Information on it is available through the producer of this videotape. There are also restaurants in the Seattle area which feature Russian and East European foods. Otto and Nadia Bush are 1966 emigres from Czechoslovakia. They operated a restaurant in Prague. Now they own the Park Restaurant at 4th and Marion Streets in Seattle. Every Monday is East European Day for lunch, but you can get Nadia's poppy seed cake and other desserts every day of the week. The Russian Samovar on Capitol Hill in Seattle was opened in 1931. Its walls were hand-painted by M.V. Shurkin and his son and depict 17th century Russian nobility. The leaded windows are based on a Russian folk tale. The former Prague restaurant of Pioneer Square will have a new name and a new location. The Labushnik will feature some foods of Czechoslovakia. In 1976, Atanas and Lubka Kolerovsky opened the Yugoslavia restaurant in the University District of Seattle. The Kolerovskys emigrated to the United States a few years ago from Macedonia. In the restaurant, they've combined the cultural treasures of food, dance, and music, which the Slavic communities of this state do not want to lose. In Macedonia, Atanas was director and Lubka a member of Tanets, the official folk dance ensemble. They would like to start a performing dance ensemble in Seattle. With people like the Kolerovskys and now the second and third generation people who are reclaiming their heritage, Slavic cultural treasures may survive here, even after some of them have disappeared in the lands of their origin.